Welcome back to Giant Monster Games. I'm Adrian, and today we are going to be talking about Modern Elves. Now, this deck is going to be running you around $57, and if you stick around to the end of the video, I will talk about how we can make this deck into a Coco Elves deck. Let's get started, starting with our mana base. For this deck, we are going to be running only 16 forests. I know that may sound extremely low, but let's jump over to creatures and I'll explain why. We are running a total of 16 cards that are going to be producing mana for us. The first 12 are all 1-drop mana dorks. These cards are 4 Elvish Mystic, 4 Lenoir Elves, and 4 Arbor Elf. As you can guess, these creatures are going to be providing us with some mana ramp. Also, we'll be using them to swing in for damage later on in the game, because this deck is packed full of lords, such as Elvish Archdruid, which is not only a lord, but is also our last mana ramp creature. We're running 4 of this card in our deck because the absolute insane amount of mana it produces is going to be vital to our endgame strategy. One of the things that defines an elf deck these days is the fact that it has an ability to combo to draw a whole bunch of extra cards or get a bunch of extra creatures into play. I'll talk about the cards we're going to be using to do that in a second, but it's worth noting that this card, plus our mana dorks, is what's going to enable us to do that. Next we have 4 copies of Dwynen's Elite. This is a 2/2 for 2 with the ability of, when it comes into play, if we have another elf, we get a 1/1 elf token. We want to make sure we get that second elf every single time, because 1, it's going to give us more mana with our Elvish Archdruid, and 2, it's going to give us another body which is going to get bigger with all of our lords. Moving on, we have 4 copies of Elvish Visionary. This is a relatively self-explanatory card. As we play it, we get to draw another card, which, with all the mana we have, will probably allow us to play that card. Cantrips are always nice, especially in a deck where we're going to be emptying our hand by turn 5 on a regular basis. Now we have 2 copies of Lis Alina Huntmaster. This card is going to allow us to get more elves whenever we play an elf spell, which, as you can guess, almost every single card in this deck is an elf, 40 of them to be exact. The one downside is generally by the time we're playing this card, we already have most of our hand on the table. So in honesty, if you're going to be upgrading this deck, this is the first card you should probably consider cutting. Let's talk about the lords in this deck. The first one we have is Impervious Perfect. We are running 4 copies of this, and it is not only going to give all of our elves +1/+1, which is what a lord does, but it is also going to be used to generate more elves for us. Now I want to point out this is the weakest lord we have in the deck, so if you're looking at upgrading, this is a good card to consider cutting. Our next lord is Jorga Warcaller. We're running 4 copies of him, and he is one of our main win conditions. As you may have noticed, we have a ton of mana sitting around, so we need a place to spend all that mana. And this becomes a perfect opportunity. He has multi-kicker, which means we can spend as much mana as we can produce to not only make him huge, but also make every single other elf we have on the table massive. A lot of times, the turn after we play him, if he doesn't get immediately removed, we'll swing in for lethal and win. And our last lord is Ezuri Renegade Leader. He is our primary win condition. We only have 2 of him in the deck because he is expensive and because he's a legendary creature, which means we do not want to draw into a second one of him, especially with some of our combo cards. Now he has 2 abilities we're interested in. The first one, he can regenerate any of our elves, which is nice, but it is not the reason we're playing him. The second ability is why we're playing this card, because it is an insane win condition for us. As we've already established, we have a ton of mana kicking around from our mana dorks and our Archdruid, so we can spend that mana to activate this ability, giving our creatures +3/+3 and trample until end of turn. And if you have extra mana kicking around after you play this ability, you can play it again, because, as I said, it is our primary win condition. The last creature we have is Sylvan Messenger. We're running 4 of this, and it is allowing us to cantrip into more cards, hopefully. When we play this card, we reveal the top 4 cards of our library and put any elves into our hand. Seeing as how literally 2/3 of our deck is elves, that should be able to get us at least a couple cards. Now I want to point out there's better effects that do exactly what this card's doing, and we're going to see those in the upgrade section because they cost a little bit more money and I didn't want to put them in the budget deck. Moving on to spells, we have a total of 4 Lead the Stampedes in this deck. This is doing the same thing as Sylvan Messenger, except for it's revealing 5 cards, and it only costs us 3 mana to do that, allowing us to get a bunch of creatures into our hand and hopefully accelerate our board state. I want to point out that board wipe effects such as Wrath of God absolutely destroy our deck, so this card allows us to rebuild hopefully quite quickly if that ever does happen to us. If you're playing against a deck that doesn't have those cards, then play this as fast as you can because you want to get as many creatures onto the table. That's the main deck. Now let's take a look at the sideboard. Firing them off as fast as I can. 3 Essence Warden, 3 Prey Upon, 4 Reclamation Sage, 2 Tomad's Crypt, 3 Wrap in Vigor. And that's it. That's the entire budget Modern Elves deck. If you liked this video and want to see more videos just like it, you may want to subscribe to this channel and hit that like button. But before I end the video, I want to talk about upgrades and how we can make this deck into a Coco Elves deck. Now you've heard me say Coco Elves like 6 times now. I am not referring to making your elf deck a chocolatey delicious treat, it actually refers to Collected Company. Now this is a better version of both Sylvan Messenger and Lead the Stampede. It allows us to look at the top 6 cards of our library, we don't have to reveal them, choose 2 creatures out of those 6 cards with converted mana cost 3 or less, and put them directly onto the battlefield. Now this is made all the better with the ability to do it at instant speed, meaning we can, and probably should, do it in response to something our opponent's doing, whether it's attacking us or just playing a spell in general. This card is extremely powerful, and you should definitely play it if you have the money. Our next upgrade is Court of Calling, which as you can guess, kinda works similar to Collected Company. It allows us to tutor any single creature in our deck. So if our opponent plays a Wrath of God effect, we can tutor up Ezuri Renegade Leader and regenerate a bunch of our elves. Or if we want, we can tutor up any of our other lords. There's lots of good options with this, including our next one, Shaman of the Pact, which is not actually an expensive card, but in order to put black mana into the deck, it becomes a little bit more expensive, and I didn't want to do that with our budget version. As you can see with both Court of Calling and Collected Company, they could potentially grab Shaman of the Pact, which makes target opponent lose life equal to the number of elves you control. That's right, this in itself could be a win condition. And the last 2 cards actually replace some of our mana dorks. We have Heritage Druid and Nettle Sentinel. The synergy between these 2 cards works like this. Whenever you play a green spell, Nettle Sentinel untaps. Then you can use Heritage Druid to retap it to then get 3 mana. Here's an example. Turn 1, you play a Forest and Nettle Sentinel. Turn 2, you play Heritage Druid, a Forest, and any other 1-drop elf. You then tap Heritage Druid, Nettle Sentinel, and your other 1-drop elf to get 3 mana. You now have 3 creatures on the battlefield and 3 mana in your mana pool. And now it sounds like a really good time to start casting that Elvish Archdruid, which would then untap your Nettle Sentinel, and then you can swing in with the 3/3 on turn 2 if you feel like it. There you have it, that is Modern Budget Elves, and how to upgrade it so it becomes a Coco Elves deck, which is extremely competitive right now if you haven't noticed. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to Giant Monster Games for more videos just like this, and until next time, don't forget to game like a giant monster.